grind his goat or whatever the saying would be.
Yeah, that
Grind
makes
his
sense.
gears.
His gears. His goat gears. Jeremy, how about you? Do you like to surf the buttholes?
Don't ask me that. That's perverted.
Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Sean Hartman, but from now on, you can call me Cosmo Nasty. Parentheses Junior. The junior's silent.
Sounds good, Cosmo Nasty.
Thank you.
I think that means that inexplicably you will just not be on the podcast anymore at some point. And I won't have, neither Jeremy nor I will know why that happened.
You know what? I'm okay with that.
There will be no record of why it happened.
Well, I'm co-host Jeremy, and speaking of no record, I think the internet's, it's failing us guys.
Yeah, I would agree.
There's too many videos of people trying to actually kiss real jellyfish and not enough information on English alt-rock bands from the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, that's the problem with the internet. If I could point to one thing that's wrong with the internet, that would be right at the top of the list.
I think there might be a couple other things, but yeah, you're right. That's number one with a bullet. I've always said that.
Yeah, stunning amount of idiocy of people actually kissing jellyfish out there. So, way to go, humanity.
See, personally, I just kept running into thinking I had maybe found information about the band and then realizing it was just something about the band Jellyfish or about the band The Jellyfish Kiss.
Yeah, the Swiss band, The Jellyfish Kiss.
Yeah. Who sometimes sound enough like Jellyfish Kiss where you're like, I guess this could have been just a slight direction change. Oh, wait, no, different band entirely.
Yeah. Well, as the person taking the lead on this one, I'm glad that I'm not alone in my pain and frustration.
It's a mysterious album, but a very good album.
And I'm co-host Peter Cook, and I've come to talk to you about Jesus and Jellyfish Kiss.
One, it's significantly easier to find information about.
Yeah, although the facts can be just about as elusive as Jellyfish Kiss.
Fair.
Yeah, that's who we're here to talk about today. The UK band Jellyfish Kiss and their 1990 release Animal Rites on the Shimmy Disc label.
1990. What an interesting year to talk about. First time on the podcast.
Yeah, it feels good to say 1990. And of course, that's because here in the opening of season 7, to reiterate for those who may have not heard our first couple episodes of the season, we're focusing on records that can be found relatively inexpensive that were released really after the LP era. If you really look at it, I think the LP starts to go out of fashion in the mid to late 80s when the cassette dominates for a few years for consumers. And then come the 90s, the compact disc takes over for quite a few years, and then
vinyl just disappears until 2005. It comes back out of nowhere.
Starts to the mid to late oddies, we'll call them. Vinyl starts to come back, and it's just exponentially grown. But yeah, so we covered a couple albums that were from right around 2010, 2011, right in kind of at the beginning of the resurgence. So we thought it'd be good to cover something that's really at the very tail end of vinyl in its initial run as a thing. And it's really getting into, kind of the years where people were not buying records. And surprisingly, this album, for how little information is out there on it, I've seen this several times out in the wild.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, it's weirdly common. It makes me really curious how many copies were pressed because it seems like it had to be fairly prevalent at some point.
Yeah, and I think, Shimmy Disc, as we'll get into, was a influential indie label, but how about we hear a track before we go any further?
Let's hear a track before we go any further.
Well, I wanted to start with the second track on the album. The first one is pretty rowdy, as much of this record is. But the second one is a little more accessible out the gate. So we're going to hear Screwed Up Papers by Jellyfish, Kiss, Side A, Track 2.
That song really is maybe the most accessible on this album.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a good starting point.
Yeah, and it's still pretty raucous and noisy.
Psychedelic.
There's hints of new wave to it.
You know what it really reminded me a lot of, as far as a sort of a scene more than a specific band, but I got some Flying Nun records, the Kiwi pop stuff out of New Zealand.
Oh yeah, that's your stuff.
Oh yeah, like the Chills, the Bats, the Clean. There's a very strong resemblance to that material, which was really started in the 80s.
Yeah. The thing that jumped to me was like Robin Hitchcock.
Yeah, there's another track later that I can hear some of that on too.
Yeah, kind of abstract lyricism and psychedelic and, fellow Englishmen.
A lot of these songs feel through composed to me rather than having a traditional verse chorus structure. Should we explain what that is?
Yeah. It means you're not repeating stuff. You're just kind of finding a new path the whole way through the song.
Yeah, there's a few good examples of popular songs that do that. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen comes to mind. But also Happiness is a Warm Gun by the Beatles and Paranoid Android by Radiohead, which was structured after Happiness is a Warm Gun. So they're like suites almost.
Yeah.
And I noticed that with this, it does feel like there's just not really traditional songs. I mean, that one had some recognizable melodies, much more so than a lot of the other songs on this that have spoken word and screaming. So there will be some surprises.
Yeah.
I was thinking that in a weird way, this band is somewhat unclassifiable for the different subgenres that they could have fit into at the time. I mean, you can just call it alt rock, indie rock, whatever, but like there's moments on here that sound like very heavy and aggressive and like no wave. And then there's stuff that sounds more jangly and kind of paisley underground. And there's tracks that are halfway between those two sounds. There's wave sounds on the B side. Like,
yeah, it got
it's a
new
very
age.
strange band. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I started to really wonder if perhaps it did a disservice to the band ultimately that they don't really seem to, not just on this album, but in their available discography, they don't seem to really have a consistent identity.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even have a consistent band from what I can see.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, those two different camps, the more like extreme heavy psychedelic and the more like melodic jangly side, like those two camps didn't really cross over very well. Like you didn't have fans of both sounds too much. So to have a band that was okay with doing both of that, I could understand that they were just like not very many people's cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. The lines were a lot more divided in 1990 than they are nowadays, as far as people being, you were kind of, often people, especially in the underground, are going to want to subscribe to a particular subgenre, and I don't know what this is exactly.
Yeah, it's like maybe grunge kids could get into it, but it's also a little too weird for that. But yeah. Cool band though. I like it.
Yeah, well, and also, at times I had to remind myself this is out of the UK.
Right.
I mean, there were some bands along those lines doing that psychedelic revival stuff like Spacemen 3, but they didn't get nearly as heavy and hard as this gets at times.
Mm-hmm.
They were more drone rock and whatnot. So it's a head scratcher, and especially looking into it further and feeling only more confused about what it is, spending time with trying to find anything that explains that. Yeah, this is a unique record, and I'm glad we're featuring it. I had picked this up at Encore Records in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for those outside of our beautiful state. I know the exact date, if you're surprised to learn that.
I'm not.
Not surprised. I am surprised that you bought your copy at Encore, because that's exactly where I bought my copy at one point. I've since sold it, regrettably, but...
Yeah, because it has the sticker on there that says so, right, though?
Yeah.
It was on April 3rd, 2010, which, Sean, you were with me that day. We were on our way to see Acid Mother's Temple at the Pike Room in Pontiac, Michigan.
Legendary show. So good.
Yeah, that's at the Crowfoot Ballroom. That's like the upstairs bar area at the Crowfoot, right?
Yeah, like a small little room where they book the acts that they're sure won't be able to fill the main stage.
Which, didn't you say on our season opener that you had seen Baby D at the Crowfoot opening for Swans?
Yes, and Swans had like sold out the big room. They were like a much bigger draw than Acid Mother's Temple at that point too, because they had like just reformed, so it was a big deal that like they had this new record and were back on tour and everything.
Yeah, I had known of Acid Mothers for several years, but I didn't realize that they would play at that time a venue that small. So it's kind of surprising to be like right in front of them with 30 other people watching them. Or however many were at that show, maybe more than that. But it felt like a small show for how big their sound is. But
yeah, and once you get into them, it feels like, God, this is like one of the coolest, like most legendary bands of all time. And yet they're still just out there plugging away at small and mid-sized venues oftentimes.
Mm-hmm. And staying at our house the following year.
Yes.
Which we alluded to in our Baby D episode. So I paid $4.72 for this. It does not seem like the value of this record has gone up in the 15 intervening years. The cover grabbed my attention. It's called Animal Rites, and that's very much depicted. There's several animals rendered on the cover. I see a pig and a tiger and looks like a cow. A goat. There's all kinds of
maybe a catfish. There's an elephant there. Let's just keep going. I want this to be the rest of the episode.
This will be better than the top 10 hip hop records of Tim Cohen, right?
Yeah. How many animals can you spot on today's album?
Is there a polar bear on there?
There might be.
Wow. Well, anyway, and so that was then right in the middle. There is a family dining, eating meat, of course. So there's some kind of statement being made here. I don't think you really have to go too far with it to figure it out. Then I turned it around and saw on the back that it's a shimmy disc release, and I'm like, for $4.72, which with Michigan tax puts you right at $5. Very clever, Encore. And I just picked it up. I remember putting it on later and being really surprised at just how diverse and heavy and psychedelic it was. Even knowing records on shimmy disc that are along those lines, this one really pushes some boundaries.
Yeah, it seems too inventive to be a cheap album. It sounds like something that's worth a lot more because it's some obscure masterpiece.
Well, it is an obscure masterpiece that just has not been. I don't know, masterpiece might be a stretch, but it's a very good album.
Yeah.
It can be a lot in one sitting. It's like 50 minutes long, but the longer I spend with it, the easier it is to take in. There's a lot of interesting passages and things that you notice upon repeat listens. This band is from Leeds, England, but this album was recorded at Noise, New York by Kramer, which is where I wanted to start with the background, since as we've kind of heavily alluded to, there's not a lot of information on this band out there. So I thought giving some background on the label Shimmy Disc and its head, the label head Kramer, would be a good place to start. So Mark Kramer was born in 1958 and adopted by a Long Island couple. He moved to New York City after graduating high school in 1976, and his music career kicked off around 1978 when he joined a band led by Bill Laswell, who we covered very early on in the podcast with his band Material, yeah. And this band that Kramer joined with Bill Laswell would actually evolve into Material, but at the time, they were acting as a house band for visiting European musicians. And the band became known as New York Gong because they were working with classic prog band Gong. The frontman and guitarist of that group, David Allen, they were touring North America with him, going around in an old school bus. So Kramer was with that group until about 1980. He only appears on one recorded song by New York Gong. He's on the organ on one song, but he was definitely in the touring band. He then began playing with musician Eugene Chadbourne around 1980. By 1982, they formed the avant rock band Shockabilly with Eugene Chadbourne on guitar, Mark Kramer on bass, and David Licht on drums. For those who don't know who Eugene Chadbourne is, how do we quick capsule someone like Eugene Chadbourne?
Legendary, genuine weirdo, genius guitarist.
Yeah, and he would go beyond the guitar, like play the electric rake.
Guitarist / rake player.
Yeah, and he gets the banjo out from time to time. Did you book Eugene Chadbourne or play with him at some point in the last 10 years?
Brad Miller, previous guest Brad Miller, was the one that booked it, and I think I played it. It's really hard for me to remember what happened at any of these shows anymore.
But you were there.
Oh, I was definitely there.
You saw him.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Did he play at Shakespeare's in Kalamazoo?
Yeah, Shakespeare's lower level.
Okay. So that band, Shockabilly, was active until the mid-1980s, and from connections made out on tour with Shockabilly, Kramer would join the Texas underground legends, the Butthole Surfers, for a brief time as their touring bassist. In 1985, upon returning to New York, following a European tour with the Surfers, he purchased a 16-track recording studio on 34th Street called Noise, New York. He used a $5,000 loan from his uncle to make this purchase. And the first song he recorded there was the Butthole Surfers version of the Guess Who classic American Woman. And so Kramer began overseeing dozens of projects at the Noise New York studio, including albums by Half Japanese, G.G. Allen, Mo Tucker of the Velvet Underground, and all 3 of the Galaxy 500 albums, which are college radio classics.
Wow, that's already quite the lineup.
Yeah, all over the place.
I'm still just a little flabbergasted that like his early start was being in the band Gong, or at least an iteration of it. Like just all of the roots, like Gong, and then the Butthole Surfers, and started a band with Eugene Chadbourne. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, he was just there for all these amazing weirdo things. And yeah, he recorded albums with David Allen of Gong much later in the 90s.
Yeah.
So and I always wondered how that happened. Well, now I know his career started with David Allen. So truly wild already, and we're just kind of getting into his story, but we should probably play another song before we go any further. The next song I wanted to feature is Regular Folk, which is side A, track 3. And in this one, Jeremy mentioned earlier that he was getting some Robin Hitchcock vibes. I really get that, like the band The Soft Boys that Robin Hitchcock was in.
Oh, yeah.
And a little bit of the Stranglers here, too, in this track.
And this is the prequel to Common People, right? Regular Folk.
Regular Folk, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure Pulp had this Jellyfish Kiss album on the platter when they came up with that song. So let's listen to Regular Folk by Jellyfish Kiss, side A, track 3.
Robin Hitchcock is such a good comparison for that song and that side of their sound. I can't believe I hadn't thought of that before, but yeah. They're still making the sound their own though. And like we said, they've just got this weird style. It's kind of this kind of like careening, like everyone's just like running forwards with the songs. Like there's not like clear, concise starts and stops. There's like this bit of like raw, sloppy energy to it that I really gravitate to.
Yeah, we touched on it on our last episode too, but this has some of those same like sloppy things that you wouldn't hear on a big album or a big label studio release kind of thing. Just like slightly timing things and really cluttered sections that make it really interesting and human, but are different from the stuff we've covered.
Yeah, far from a commercial product.
Yeah, and pretty baffling in the musical landscape of 1990. Once again, just who were their peers?
Yeah, while we were listening to that, I was like, oh, this is a little catchy, and then this like atonal guitar solo comes in. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, they don't really keep you in one place for too long when it's more of a normal song. Sometimes when it's more of a drone or a really heavy feeling, they tend to stay in those places longer.
Yeah.
And pretty soon we'll get into one of those heavier numbers, but we'll go back to Kramer and Shimmy Disc for now, the story, because we're really getting to when he founds Shimmy Disc, which was in 1987. He was effectively the in-house producer for the label as well as the label head. The purpose of the label was to release music that no one else cared about. That's what he would always repeat in interviews. I want to put out music that no one else cares about.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying like this band is unclassifiable and doesn't fit into any scene or genre, but the thing that makes sense is they are a shimmy disc band. They fit in with the other shimmy disc bands who are all generally pretty equally unclassifiable and strange. So,
that they
found the scene, yeah.
Yeah. Over the next dozen years, the label would release over 100 albums, which included many that would become college radio staples. Artists like Daniel Johnston, Jad Fair, King Missile, Gwar, and Boredoms, to name just a few. And many...
John Zorn,
exactly, yeah. And many would even go on to major label success after the alternative rock boom in the early 1990s. Shimmy Disc was about 5 years ahead of that, really. Definitely a label that helped sort of steer things in that direction. And the flagship artist for the label was Kramer's new project with former Shockabilly drummer David Licht, along with film and television actress Ann Magnuson, among other people, but the band was Bongwater.
Mm-hmm. I recently watched the movie Panic Room without realizing that the singer from Bongwater has a small role in it.
Yeah, and Magnuson,
that was cool to find out today. Yeah,
she'll pop up here and there for sure. Yeah. She had a real acting career, and the group had a flair for psychedelic covers, while their original work tended to lampoon star systems of both the mainstream and the underground, and they would critique driving desires such as sex and money frequently in their music. And sonically, Bongwater had few boundaries, much like the band that we're listening to today. I mean, that probably... Bongwater is a good comparison to this. Their albums and even individual tracks could veer from unruly psych rock to pastoral folk, to sound collage, to lounge, to spoken word, often taken directly from Ann Magnuson's dream journals. So their albums can be highly interesting, but also exhausting to listen to as well.
And they also probably had the best performance on Night Music, would you say?
I would 100% say that Bongwater, and that's not a that's not to say that Night Music wasn't consistently incredible as far as the performances that are on there. I mean, there's a Sun Ra performance on there that's up there for me as well. But yes, when Bongwater appeared on Night Music with David Sanborn, which would have aired, I think, on NBC, mm-hmm. They performed with Screamin' Jay Hawkins and Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead. And the fabulous Pussy Willows, I think, are their backing singers on that.
Yeah, sounds right, yeah.
And it's something you got to see if you have not seen that performance of them. And they're doing a cover of Rocky Erickson from the 13th Floor Elevators, his song "You Don't Love Me Yet." It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's something to behold. It's one of those rare things of like, truly, how did this ever get on television? This is like such a miraculous piece of like insane weirdo art.
Absolutely, yeah. The band's 5-year run, Bongwater that is, they had their 5-year run of subversive material was unfortunately followed by 5 years of legal battles between Kramer and Ann Magnuson after a short and ill-fated romantic relationship between the two that ended the band. And then, yeah, they were tied up in these legal battles for 5 years, and we'll come back around to that. But
and it like basically ended the label for a little while too, kind of, right?
Well, that's where we're going to come back around to the fact that it put an end to Shimmy Disc. But Bongwater's legacy is only a small part of the Shimmy Disc story. Kramer would scour New York City for bands that fit into his vision. And in 1990, he stopped at the Pyramid Club in the East Village and happened to catch an early show by a duo from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Can you guys see where this is going? Can you
Oh no!
can you see where I'm taking this?
Oh, Peter, you dirty dog, you!
Who do you think that band was?
I won't even say it.
Ween.
I know.
So Kramer was impressed by Ween, and I'm sure they would have just been operating as a duo with a drum machine behind them for that performance. And Kramer got to talking to Dean and Gene Ween, and they were about 20 at the time. They found that they had a lot in common, being fans of both the Beatles and the Butthole Surfers. So Mickey Melchiondo, a.k.a. Dean Ween, I found some quotes from him, which I think give some insight into what it was like to work with this label. He is quoted as saying, "You couldn't touch Kramer's taste or his instincts. Look at the catalog. He had the Boredoms, Guar, John Zorn. The guy always knew what time it was. We were living in New Hope, Pennsylvania, doing our thing in our apartment. To us, Kramer was like the Wizard of Oz or something." And they ended up sending Kramer their 4-track home recordings as a demo. Dean Ween said, "We planned on re-recording them prior to releasing them. When Kramer heard them, he said, 'No, this 4-track stuff is the shit. This is the album.'" It was what was released as the second official Ween album, The Pod, in 1991. In exchange, Kramer gave them $2,500 and took them to Jamaica. They never even signed a contract, as they were already under contract with Twin Tone Records at the time. It was a straight-up one-time agreement.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It's really fun to think of Ween and Guar as label mates.
Yeah, well, to the extent that Guar sampled a Ween song on one of their albums.
Nice.
I guess that explains how that happened. I remember being confused as to how that happened, but that makes sense. So Kramer seems to have had a lax approach as on the business end of things, but it did seem to catch up with him when artists felt that they were owed money. And Magnuson, his former bandmate in Bongwater, being just one of those people, the label folded at the end of the 90s amid many legal issues that Kramer was wrapped up in. And many of the exact details are obscured, but he did finally, thankfully, revive Shimmy Disc in 2020. So after a 20-year absence, we got Shimmy Disc back in the last 5 years. It's now being done in partnership with Joyful Noise Recordings, and the label has released a lot of previously unreleased material by deceased artists like Daniel Johnston, Allen Ginsberg, Hunter S. Thompson, and Bruce Hack.
And, wow. And Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, yeah. I don't exactly know how that works, but yeah, I did see his name.
Yeah, it's funny to scan the like artist roster on their website, and there's just an Edgar Allan Poe portrait in the middle of all of these like more modern alternative artists. I also saw that Kramer's kind of a new age guy now, which is interesting. Like just put out an album with Laraji.
Really?
Yeah, kind of a. Very it makes sense though. I mean, I could see that transition in his later years, trying to quiet down a little bit.
Yeah, he kind of always had a vibe about him, like he might head that direction eventually.
Yeah, maybe it was his call to put the wave sounds on this album.
Yeah, maybe he wanted a little of that. Got to get a little nature in there. Mm-hmm. His Kramer's solo albums that were mostly released in the 90s, I believe, those are great. I love those. The Secret of Comedy is one of my favorite albums, so those are worth checking out too. And Bongwater is fantastic. But let's shift back to Jellyfish Kiss. We're going to listen to a track and then just go through the little information that I could find on them. Once we hear, we're going to hear some big sounds in the form of the song Big Talk, which this gets into almost a Scratch Acid or Jesus Lizard feel, which that's very American sounding music to me. And here's a UK band doing, I guess, probably kind of concurrent to Scratch Acid and Jesus Lizard. So don't know how it happened, but let's listen to Big Talk, side B, track 1.
I've come to talk to you about Jesus.
I can't remember what song we said this of previously, but that's got to be up there as far as heaviest songs we've ever featured on the program.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. There's not a lot of material we've covered that really gets into this territory. That's like, that song is full on, like you said, scratch acid, noise rock, no wave territory. That's also my favorite song on the album. I have fond memories of playing that song on WIDR back in the day.
Oh yes, the college station that we both DJ'd at and sort of semi-met through, I would say, amongst other connections around Kalamazoo, Michigan. But yeah, that one, it feels like that could have just been their whole sound. Like there are bands that's what they do, and they do it very well. Like you could be convinced that is what this band came to do. And then
do you think they would have been more popular if they'd have just done that sound all the way through?
Yes.
I think they potentially, if they found the right small demographic, they could have been in that like Jesus Lizard sort of camp of a band that would be the people that really like that sound would latch on to. But the people that really like that sound would be turned off by a lot of the other sounds on this record.
Right, exactly. Like if they're opening for the Butthole Surfers, people are going to love that song, and then they start doing regular folk and screwed up people, or regular screwed up folk people.
Wasn't that the 45 the split 7-inch that we talked about? Yeah.
Yeah, suddenly you're getting beers thrown at you when you're playing those songs to that crowd, you know?
Absolutely. So, yeah, and that's the other thing is I wish that there was any live footage of this band available. I'm so curious about what they were like live and who their audience was, but
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that they were amazing live. I just, especially with that kind of sloppiness and raw energy that they captured in the studio, I bet their live shows were crazy.
I was scouring YouTube comments for any like shred of information about this band and didn't see any live videos, and saw one comment of somebody be like, does anybody have any live footage of this band? So you're not the only one hankering it, Peter.
Well, who knows? Maybe, hopefully this episode will reach the right person and some things can become unearthed about this band, which we'll now get into. Jellyfish Kiss and what little information is out there on them. They were formed around 1985 in Leeds, England. Guitarist Mark Stein and drummer Mark Drew were the founding members. I was amazed when I found their last names, because often with this band, for some reason, only the first name is listed or a pseudonym. Sean, what was your intro name?
Cosmo Nasty.
Yeah, that was an early member. It was Cosmo Nasty. And there were just so many members that came and went throughout the band's lifespan, and often in the liner notes to the albums, it might mention a couple names, but not the full band. It's so confusing. I could not find anywhere a comprehensive lineup on even for any specific release. They seem to have had Bandcamp pages at one time, but those have disappeared, and I couldn't find them in any kind of internet archive or Wayback Machine form.
I found a MySpace page. But it had like no information on it.
At a certain point, it seems it's just shrouded in mystery for a reason. But
right. That was something I got thinking about looking for stuff about this, is like with the other vinyl resurgence bands we've covered that was firmly in the internet era. So even though there's not much information, there is stuff out there and you can find it because of the internet. But this precedes that. So these obscure bands, there's just like not much info on.
No interviews, as we said, no live footage that's been uploaded. It could be sitting on an old VHS in a cabinet somewhere.
And if you have that VHS, please upload it.
Yeah, or if you're sitting on like a really cool zine library and you've got like a good interview with Jellyfish Kiss that you can make copies of and send our way,
please do. Email us at idbuythatpodcast@gmail.com. I repeat, idbuythatpodcast@gmail.com. We will totally do a follow-up, at least in one of our For the Record sections on the podcast, if any information can come to light. But we do know that they released a debut album, Gasoline Junkie, in 1989 on the Long Pig label. They then signed to Demon Records, who issued the second album, Plank, in 1990. This album was recorded at Noise New York by Kramer, who that same year recorded and released this album, Animal Rites, that we're listening to today, on Shimmy Disc, and would later re-release the Plank album as well. I have a copy of that I believe is the Shimmy Disc version. The available information says that for this album, a guy named Greg Seaver is on drums, Mick Flanagan is on keyboards, or as he's credited on the back, Mick. Andy Brown and Jess Diebel are listed as the vocalist. It seems that they would have different vocalists for every album, too. They had definitely had someone else on the Plank album just a few months before this. So there was a lot of turnover in this band, and I'm fairly certain that the bassist is John Galvin, although maybe it's someone named Nick. I can't say for certain that either of the Marks who started the band are still involved by this point. At some point, there's someone named Chill on the drums. I think that's for one of the following releases after this, but there really isn't a lot of information or a definitive bio for this band. They did record a Peel session at the BBC in 1990, and there's information that in 1991, the band faced a setback when they were attacked on tour and had their equipment stolen, like thousands of dollars or pounds in equipment stolen. They released another album, Stormy Weather, in 1991 and an EP in 1992 and called it quits after that. That is as much as I have.
Yeah, pretty short run for them.
Yeah, especially as far as the time frame that they were really releasing music. Yeah, it's like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years. And I really would love to learn a more definitive story. One of their later members, and I didn't write his name down. What was that guy's? The David guy.
David Tomlinson, who it seems like played guitar for them at some point, and
maybe sang later on. I wasn't totally clear on what his role was, but he went on to some other bands of note with one of the members of Sisters of Mercy.
Yeah, they originally called it CNN until they got sued, of course. So they changed it to XCNN, which they're a pretty interesting band.
Yeah, that was more in the mid-90s, I think, or early to mid-90s.
Yeah.
And then there was another band that had Tin in the name.
Tin Star.
Yeah, I checked some of that out, too. And one of the songs, one of the lyrics in it seemed to be a Dog Bowl reference, which was a Shimmy Disc band. So it seemed to tie it together a little bit for me. But in any of the interviews I found with Dave Tomlinson, he didn't really make mention of having been in Jellyfish Kiss as part of his career.
Yeah.
So you were helping me with that, Jeremy. Thank you for going to those lengths.
Yeah. I also saw Andy Brown, the vocalist on this album for Jellyfish Kiss, was credited on an XCNN album. So it seems like there's some kind of crossover happening there, but
yeah,
it's hard to figure out.
And a lot of the names of the people in this band are they're names that are very hard to research.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any insight, once again, email us at idbuythatpodcast@gmail.com. But for how good this record is, like I said, I would stop short of calling it a masterpiece, but I would call it a very good, bordering on great album for just kind of how much it really kind of predates. So it's a precursor to so much that came after 1990.
Yeah. And for being an album you can pick up cheap, it's pretty out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And like we said, it's fairly common. I mean, Shimmy Disc had good distribution. For an indie label, their albums really they were very popular on the college rock circuit. So they seem to have made their way around the States and Europe. They had European distribution as well. So I would say if you find an album and it's on Shimmy Disc, pick it up, especially because so many of them, I think some of them do command a higher price than this. That is correct, right, Sean?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, like the Naked Lunch album and like a few others are pretty valuable, but there's a handful of other really good shimmy disc releases that are very cheap. A lot of the actual like Kramer projects themselves are still affordable too. I just picked up Shockabilly's first album recently for like $4.
Yeah, those predated the label, but he re-released them in the late 80s, early 90s on Shimmy Disc, yeah. So that's as much as I have. Sean, I'm curious what you put together for recommended similar albums.
Well, before we get to that, I have
you had a
much
very
more important mystery that I solved. This is like a question I've casually had in the back of my head for, I don't know, a decade that I just bothered to actually figure out. So when you look at shimmy disc releases, the catalog number usually has a whole bunch of zeros before it. And I've kind of always casually wondered, like, is there a method to it? Do they all have the same number of extra zeros?
Yeah, I'm looking at the spine of this album right now, and yeah, there are many, many, many zeros in front of it.
All right, well, after looking at multiple shimmy disc releases on Discogs, I have solved it. Release number 1 was 001, as a lot of labels do, and then every time they went up a number, they added a 0.
No way.
So there's always one more 0 than what the release number is. So this is shimmy disc number 38, so there's 39 zeros.
Oh my God.
I will sit here and count, and this will be the best podcasting ever.
Thank you.
Don't do it.
Okay, no, do it. You have to do it. You have to.
Jeremy will edit it out if I do it. I
1,
did it, and he edited
2.
it out. Yeah, if you didn't like me naming off the animals on the cover, you're sure not going to like that. Well, that's cool, Sean. I can't believe you. So you figured that out independently just by looking through the catalog numbers?
Yeah, well, you guys were unsuccessfully trying to research band members. I was just counting zeros over here, doing the real work.
Amazing. 5 stars out of 5, Sean.
Thank you.
Okay, well, which catalog numbers and how many zeros do they have did you pick for your recommended?
I didn't even write down the catalog numbers, but I have 3 shimmy disc related albums that I highly recommend. First up, the previously mentioned debut Shockabilly album Earth versus Shockabilly from 1983. I really want to cover this one on the podcast later. Maybe we'll get previous guest Brad Miller to come on so we can go real deep on the great Eugene Chadbourne, who is a member of Shockabilly.
Yeah. Brad was, of course, a wider DJ starting, I believe, in the 87, 88, in that time frame, right around the time Shimmy Disc as a label started. So he saw a lot of these artists perform when they would come through Kalamazoo and was buying these releases as they were coming out. So it'd be great to have Brad on. There's really no more qualified guest unless we got Kramer.
Yeah, which, I mean, maybe, wouldn't rule it out. Let's see. One thing we should mention that is interesting about a lot of these shimmy disc bands, especially the Kramer ones, is they're usually pretty cover heavy. Like the first Shockabilly album has like multiple Hendrix covers on it. There's a Doors cover and things. And I mean, they're oftentimes covered in a way where if you weren't really paying attention, you would never think of it as being a cover.
Yeah. We mentioned that Bongwater did that a lot too. They would do versions of Monkees songs and Led Zeppelin songs and the Beatles.
Yeah, it was kind of across the board. It was an interesting feature there. But yeah, I love that first Shockabilly album. Next one, Bongwater. Mentioned them a bunch, but I'm highly recommending their first album, Double Bummer, from 1988. That is a super dense album that just goes so many places and is a kind of wild underground minor masterpiece.
Yeah, that's one I have on CD.
Yeah, it's a dense, wonderful album. And last up is one that I know Peter is going to very strongly co-sign, and maybe you don't even know how cheap this album is. Dog Bull, Tit, and Opera from 1989, still a less than $10 album.
That is so wild. That's such an incredible album. Brad got me into that around 2010, 2011. Yeah.
I first heard about it while listening to you cover one of the songs off of it at a house show.
Yeah, it was probably Monkey Bars.
Yep.
Yeah, I used to play that one a lot. That's the song that I think I'm pretty positive was quoted in, I can't remember this band's name, Tin
Star.
Tin Star. Yeah, I'm really positive that he was Dave Tomlinson was making a reference to Monkey Bars by Dog Bowl.
Nice.
So that's good. So that's still a cheap record.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked. And in my mind, that's like a pretty incredible, revered classic of the underground, but apparently not for very many people.
Yeah, well, it's pretty strange stuff, but it's really good songwriting. Like that's very strong. Like that, there's a lot less noise and psychedelia on the Dog Bowl album. Is very earnest songwriting.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jeremy, I think of all of these bands, Dog Bowl would be the one I would recommend to you first. Are you familiar with Dog Bowl at all?
I heard about it about 30 seconds ago.
Okay, good.
I'll send you something later.
All right.
Yeah, Jeremy, what do you think about all this shimmy disc stuff? I feel like some of it would work for you, and some of it I feel like has got to be kind of annoying to your sensibilities. But where are you at?
I'm not super familiar with most of this stuff.
Yeah, well, there's over 100 releases, as we said, so I'm only probably familiar with a dozen or so, really. I still have a long way to go with that. Like, I know of a lot of the bands, but yeah.
Yeah, the ones you name, the only one I know decently well is Daniel Johnston, and I enjoy that, but that's not as noisy and such as all these other ones you're mentioning.
Yeah. So when you come across a Jellyfish Kiss album at the store, are you going to pick it up or just be like, oh yeah, I remember talking about this?
I think I'm going to pick it up.
Okay.
I actually
cool.
enjoyed most of this. There's like a few times where it got a little abrasive.
There are some very long passages on this record, and I decided that I wanted to go with the more accessible sections because I couldn't really figure out where in those long passages to start or stop.
Yeah.
And really make them make sense.
Yeah, and sometimes you got to really listen to it all the way through to like get the full effect of it. Just taking a clip might seem weird.
Yeah, this was a difficult record to choose what to feature, but I'm pretty happy with where we ended up. And I'm glad you guys, I knew Sean was familiar with it. I wasn't sure where he stood because he had mentioned selling off his copy, but I think at a certain point you just had so much stuff that you kind of had to do a purge, right, Sean?
Yeah, I purged multiple times for various reasons, and at one point I got rid of a lot of this kind of like heavier, noisier rock stuff because I collected it a lot at one point. Like the more abrasive, the better. And later on, I was just like, man, I just don't ever put this on at home anymore, and I can't. There's like no scenario where I would DJ these records for any of the stuff that I do. It felt like it was taking up space, and now that I've sold it, I'm just like, man, I didn't even get much money for it. Like, I'm not selling off valuable records. Like, what was I doing? I should have just kept it, but I'm sure I'll find another one soon enough.
Well, you were trying to collect all the albums we featured, and
I have to now. Yeah,
you have a little section of your library that you put them in now, don't you?
Yeah. So anytime we cover an album that I already own, I have to move it from one section to the podcast featured section.
Our listeners did not know the Sean Hartman that I met 15-ish years ago, who had not gone through his funk and soul, that whole, I don't know if Renaissance isn't the right word, but the sort of awakening.
Yeah. Then followed by the New Age awakening.
Yeah. Our listeners don't know that. Yeah, you at one time, like when I first met you, you were into very abrasive music at that time. Very challenging stuff.
I was the noise rock guy for a minute there.
Yeah. And then I started to see that shift just a year or two into knowing you, and then the next thing I knew, you were like way deep in the soul and funk, and then later like gospel, and then it somehow veered into new age, and it's been an incredible journey to watch.
Yeah, when I find that new hyperfixation, I go deep.
It's how you keep it interesting and a lifelong passion, right? All right. Well, I think we've said as much here as we can because, I got literally nothing left.
Well, there's one thing left. What are you going to leave us on?
I'm going to leave us on the song Underground, which I mentioned Spacemen 3 earlier, and they're another UK band, much better known than Jellyfish Kiss. Pretty influential band. Of course, those members also went on to very high, like the band Spiritualized and Sonic Boom, Spectrum, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Spacemen 3, I couldn't find that these bands ever crossed paths in any way, but this track especially, Underground, definitely gave me that drone rock feeling. Interestingly, Spacemen 3, the more I learned about music, I realized that a lot of their stuff was either covers or references to other artists, often obscure experimental artists. Interestingly, with Jellyfish Kiss, yeah, I didn't really sense that there were any covers on this. I think this is all original material for saying that, yeah, a lot of Shimmy Disc does include covers. I think this is all original songs on this. We'll go out on the song Underground. We're going to jump a little ways into it where it really starts to pick up and go into the song because there's a long, extended, noisy intro. So we'll do that. Of course, you can check us out over on patreon.com/I'd Buy That podcast to support the program and get some bonus content in return, bonus episodes. We'll have more of those this season now that we're into season 7. Help us out. Keep the lights on. You guys ready to go underground here?
Let's go underground.
All right. Thank you for listening to I'd Buy That for $1. I'm co-host Peter Cook.
I'm co-host Jeremy.
And I'm Cosmo Nasty, signing off.
I'm signing off too.
I'm staying